When I was first introduced to the comic book genre, I was about 5-ish, something like that. I became obsessed with this one character. You probably don't know who he is. He's very obscure. His name is Superman. Oh, you do know who he is. Wow, that's really cool. Anyway, yeah. I used to watch Richard Donner's Superman over and over again on my grandma's giant tube TV in her basement. I even sat for hours next to her as she sewed together a Superman costume for me. And the only time I got up was to take a shit or a piss. I would even throw tantrums in public because my parents wouldn't let me watch Superman Returns. Until they did, and I was traumatized by this scene. I was 5, shut up. Fast forward a year later, my dad takes me to Blockbuster, ask your parents. And guess what we rented? Nope, we rented Spider-Man. And yes, as one might guess, I loved it. And that's what really branched me out to the genre. Like, I got introduced to other characters like Hulk, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and later on I became a huge Batman fan. These characters pretty much defined my childhood. But here's the thing though. I never actually read the comics at that time. I only watched the movies, cartoons, or played the video games. It wasn't until freshman year of high school when I read my first comic book, and that was Venom Lethal Protector. And yeah, it was pretty good. I liked it. It wasn't amazing, but I think it was pretty good for my first comic. The important thing is, however, when I finally closed the book, I realized how much I missed out as a kid, and I honestly regret not giving it a chance sooner. And since then, I started reading more and more comics, and now it's just a regular thing that I do. As I became a more avid comic book reader, I've noticed this mentality that's kind of silly. It doesn't really make much sense to me. It's that comics are looked at as something that's childish or irrelevant. And I want to talk about that today and explain why it really should be looked at as just another way of telling stories. And what better way to start off than to talk about this guy?
Comics are for kids. Grow up.
Now I know Bill Maher's segment on comic books has been talked about and covered, but it helps prove my point, so just bear with me. Now Squidward over here thinks that comic books are for kids. Okay. I'm going to assume that he's stating that as a fact, which isn't the case, but for the sake of the argument, let's say that it is. Just because something is aimed towards kids doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed by adults. Allow me to explain how stupid this sounds. Excuse me, sir, are you eating an ice cream cone as a grown-ass man? Sorry, that stuff's for kids. You can't eat that shit. You need to grow up. Here, eat a salad, bitch. I don't know about you, but that sounds a little childish to me. Well, he actually touches on this in a segment, but doesn't really go anywhere with it. Instead, he tries to make a joke.
And by the way, if someone says you're being childish and you react by throwing a tantrum, you're not Iron Man. You're Irony Man.
Oh, fuck, man. You really got me there, Bill.
The folks at Stan's company, Team Stan, wrote an open letter to me and said, you have a right to your opinion that comics are childish and unsophisticated. Many said the same about Dickens, Steinbeck, Melville, and even Shakespeare. No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did.
No one ever said that. No one ever said King Lear or Moby Dick was childish and unsophisticated. If you ever read a book without pictures, you'd know that.
No, they did, Bill. If you knew how to use Google, you'd know that. Anyway, if comics were stuck in that Silver Age era, you might actually have a leg to stand on, Bill, but that's not the case here. Comics have evolved so much over the years. And even back during the Silver Age, they were covering some pretty mature themes, such as Harry overdosing on LSD, or the entire war on drugs, or even the night Gwen Stacy died, which by the way was a really big deal at the time because normally you don't kill off the love interest. And even later in the 80s, shit got really dark with even more comics like The Killing Joke, or The Dark Knight Returns, or Kraven's Last Hunt. And probably the best example that completely debunks this wet fart of a stereotype, Punisher Max. This book goes all out with the blood, gore, and profanity. I mean, do you really want to show your kid a panel where a woman gets shot in the back of the neck and then simultaneously bleeds out and makes a little vaginal spillage in her pants? I think it's only fair to mention stuff like The Boys or Invincible. I mean, come on, think, Bill. Much like movies, there are comics for both children and adults. Well, I guess you wouldn't know that because, would it surprise you if I said that he's never read a comic book before? Here, I have the clip to prove it.
I don't read comic books. I didn't even read them when I was a child.
You know, I've never watched The Walking Dead, but that show is fucking awful. And whoever watches it is a fucking idiot. Alright, moving along. On the contrary, there are people who like these characters, but they think the comics are irrelevant because the movies are so huge now that there's really no point in reading the books because you can just go see the movie instead. I have 2 reasons why this is a pretty weak claim. 1. These characters would not exist if it weren't for their comic book appearances. Without Amazing Fantasy 15, there would be no Spider-Man. Without Action Comics #1, there would be no Superman. Without Grant Morrison's Serious House on Serious Earth, there would be no Arkham games. Without Alan Moore's Watchmen, there would be no Zack Snyder Watchmen. And without Mark Millar's Civil War, there would be no Captain America Civil War. You get the point. 2. Most of what you're getting in the movie is not the most accurate representation of that character or storyline. Now, before I go any further, I do want to clarify that that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes going in a new direction can be done well. It can adapt a character the way it's originally intended to, but in its own unique way. And sometimes the source material just sucks and needs to be changed. But then sometimes there are way too many unnecessary changes to the point where it's like, why are you even trying?
Hush, Batman. Hush.
What I'm trying to say is that if you only know a certain character through the movies, you're missing out on a lot. There's a lot of good stories from that character. Doesn't matter who it is. These movies should inspire you to read up on these characters rather than the opposite. And you can learn some good life lessons too. Like how to cope with your anger, or how to turn pain and suffering into something good, in both the right way and the wrong way, or why you shouldn't be fucking racist, or no matter how many times life in its own way kicks you in the balls, you can always get back up and keep moving forward. And yes, with great power comes great responsibility, I know. And another thing that's shoved under the rug with the movies is that a lot of characters suffer from a lot of mental illness and addiction. Iron Man and Daredevil are really addicted to alcohol, and sex too. And there's also a lot of depression. Like, a lot of depression. And one of my favorite characters, Moon Knight, suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and he's also just fucking insane. And I really hope the new series doesn't water him down. I mean, I know they will, at least a little bit, but just not too much, please. Now, in this video, I know I can come across as gatekeeping. I understand that. Let me say that that's not what I'm trying to do. If you don't like comics, that's fine. They're not your thing. I feel you. But I think you should at least give it a shot once. And if you have, and you still don't like comics, that's still cool. I've never been a huge book reader, don't really care for them, but I still think they're a valid way of telling stories, much like comics. For those of you interested in getting into comics, here are a few recommendations. If you're wanting to get into Batman, Batman Hush is my #1 go-to. It's so fucking good. Jim Lee's art is so sexy. There's also Long Halloween, Nightfall, and as mentioned before, Punisher Max, Charlie Houston's Moon Knight run, Spider-Man: A Day in the Life, The Death of Jean DeWolf, Kraven's Last Hunt, The Child Within, Peter Parker's Spider-Man #20, Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run, and that's just to name a few. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Sorry it took me so long to make, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. If there's anything I missed, or there's something you would like to add, leave it in the comments. But other than that, that's about it. Follow me on Twitch. I just streamed Arkham Asylum, so that was fun. And I plan on streaming this game called Murder House. I think that's what it's called. It's basically like this Silent Hill, Resident Evil type game, so that'll be fun. I'll probably be streaming that this weekend. And follow me on Instagram too, I post content there. I also want to thank Isaiah. He's also known as Spider-Manderson on Instagram. He made the thumbnail, so really appreciate that. And yeah, that's about it. See ya.
Comics are for kids. That's why they sell them next to the Pokemon cards and not on the aisle with the condoms and the lube.
Let's test that theory. Okay, so I'm in Walmart right now, and Bill said that you can find comics where the Pokemon cards are, not the condoms and the lube. The dude would say Pokemon, honestly. Okay, to be honest, I have no idea where the Pokemon cards are. Okay, like deadass, I cannot find the Pokemon cards. This is actually fucking ludicrous. Holy shit. Pokemon cards. Okay, so it turns out they only have Pokemon cards online, so that's gonna be a problem. But I have looked at the toy section and there are no comics, so let's look at the condoms. Alright, so I'm at the condoms, and so far I don't see anything. Oh shit. That's pretty cool.